Hello, hello, hello. Hey, you guys. It's me, Dr. Victorious. I'll be Dr. V for this one. Make sure you guys are following us on all social media platforms everywhere. Name it Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. I'm on Pinterest. I'm everywhere, you guys, as Dr. Victorious. If not, it's Be Victorious with Dr. Tori Williams. And it is my extreme pleasure to introduce this young lady for episode number 14. Now, anybody that knows me knows that 14 is a special number to me. And I had to bring a special guest. This young lady, Miss Vita Starr, is representing, I'm telling you, LA, stand up. You all know who she is, Miss Vita Starr. Come on in. It is my pleasure to have you on this wonderful podcast. I mean, LA, y'all have to stand up. She has represented everywhere. When I mean radio, TV, in the community, she has done so much. And I think what I love is if you ask me if she's trauma informed, yes, she is. She definitely knows about adverse childhood experiences. She does that on the West Coast. She represents, she does public speaking. She actually, name it, she's done it. And I'm going to, of course, ask her, does she know about adverse childhood experiences? But she's here because she loves me and she's going to share her story. Vita Starr, hi.
Hi. That was a wonderful, beautiful intro. I appreciate that. That was so sweet.
You're awesome. You are my favorite number. Anybody that knows me know 14 is it. I'm a tell 14 or 14, it is what it is. And I think I'm going to take a break after this one because I know for a fact this episode is going to be the one. You are amazing. The things that you've done in California, not just in California, but we talking about in your community where you grew up, is an amazing thing. It speaks volumes. Everybody knows Miss Vita Starr. And if you all don't, they will after this interview because it's my pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. I appreciate that. That's great. And yes, I do know about ACEs.
All right. And so I think this would be good to just have this dialogue. I will let you all know. We've been trying to do this for almost 2 years. She's one of the first people that I met. And, I wanted to seek information and I wanted to, do it the right way. But I will be totally honest with you here recently, we have connected. And when we connected and we stayed. I think I missed a couple of appointments, some interviews, just sitting there having great dialogue. It's great to talk to somebody that actually knows about it because there are people that don't. There are people that don't know about adverse childhood experiences at all. And so to have that conversation and discussion with someone that does it, teaches it, talks about it, speaks for it, advocates for it, yeah, it made my heart really, really, really happy. So I thank you so much for being here. Seriously.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. This is very exciting.
Good.
And by the way, just so you know, the interview that you did on our show, Champagne Sharks, the editor loves you. So that you are just pleasant and wonderful to listen to. Like, he loved you. So just wanted to tell you that too, that you're amazing and you sounded amazing. And I'm so excited about this.
Yay. So we got some things that we're cooking up, but this one here, I'm just excited. Like I said, I'm ready. So you have the questions. I sent them to you.
You did.
I know you're ready.
I'm ready.
I'm interested because I know when someone asks me what is ACEs, I have my answer. What is ACEs?
So ACEs is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This is a study that explains how your childhood traumas and experiences translate into health outcomes later in life. And a lot of people don't associate trauma with physical health. They mostly only think about it in ways of mental health. They feel like the physical health is the result of the mental health. So for example, people might believe, you have a rough childhood, you're of course more prone to escaping through alcohol and substances, but people, and that would then result in health outcomes, maybe heart disease and liver problems and different things like that. But the reality is that even in the absence of health risk behaviors, you're still more likely to get certain diseases, such as heart disease, diabetes, certain types of cancers, and more. And you're also prone to be hurt more. So there's a lot that goes into understanding the role that childhood trauma plays, and ACEs does a pretty good job of explaining how that happens. It also does a pretty good job of giving us categories to look at, so the types of traumas that exist. My only critique of ACEs is that when it comes to specific groups, it has to be more inclusive of certain types of traumas. So for example, what about the trauma of enslavement and then the impact of that trauma, right? So ACEs doesn't have a question on their questionnaire about, are you the descendant of enslaved people? That's not on ACEs, right? But there are other studies that exist that are a little bit more encompassing, where they look at things like, access to housing, access, racism, being discriminated against, social mobility. So there are other studies that are similar to the ACEs study that Kaiser did with the CDC, which is the original one, such as the Philadelphia Urban ACEs study, which has like 40 questions as opposed to 10, like the CDC Kaiser study.
Yeah. Now, did y'all hear her? So, wow, you all think that I'm just doing this. There's other people out there that are doing this.
Yes.
So, when I tell people, you have a story and you're not alone, well, guess who's not alone? Me, because there is someone on the West Coast that is representing, that is advocating for ACEs. She's doing the same thing, and we're not in competition at all. We're here. We're good.
I want more people to be doing this. It should this should be regular conversation. We should be talking about this all day, every day, especially in Black media. Especially in Black media.
Yeah, but we don't want to. We want to hide it. We don't want to have this discussion. So let's have it for them, shall we?
Absolutely. I'm ready for the next one.
Okay.
Next question.
I'm going to skip all the initial questions because, again, most of the guests that I've had don't really know about ACEs, so it's easy to ask those questions. So I'm going to start with the questions about your story. So when did you find out about ACEs? When did you find out that you might have had ACEs?
So I first heard of ACEs from the TED Talk that Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris did about ACEs. Somehow it popped up on my Facebook feed, and I watched it in amazement. I had never heard anything like it. And even at the time, my brain didn't associate it with myself.
Right.
I was thinking about my work, because part of my background, outside of working in media, has been working with children and families. So I've worked as a caseworker. I worked with children whose parents were incarcerated. I've worked with children who are pregnant and parenting teens, kids on probation, kids in group homes, kids in foster care and kinship care. That's many years of working in social services and doing social service work and working in schools. But so my brain didn't even think about it applying to me personally. My first thought was, oh, the kids I work with. It wasn't until years later, I was about maybe 25, 26 years old, and I had my first mental breakdown. I didn't even know what a breakdown was. I didn't even know I was in depression. But then, I kind of got out of that breakdown because I was going through a traumatic experience where my father had relapsed. He was an alcoholic, but he had been sober for about 24, 25 years. And then literally one day I find out he's back drinking and he's harassing me. A lot of things are going on. It's to the point where the doctor even tells me if he lands himself in the hospital, and the doctor said if he does not stop drinking, he will die. And then I got a call from my father's supervisor. Now, my father at the time was a university professor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a research professor. Mind you, my father, just kind of give you a little bit of his background, which I think will give you some insight into my background. My father was a single parent, raised us in South Central LA by himself, although my mother was around. I visited her on like weekends, school breaks, things like that. But for the most part, I was raised with my father. And my dad was a dry drunk. So he was sober the whole time he raised us. But he replaced alcohol with church, which turned out to not be a great thing. Most of the time, church is a wonderful thing. It's one of the most important ways, spirituality is one of the most important ways to get you through certain traumatic experiences. But because of that, there are people who take advantage of people who are traumatized, and they seek out traumatized people to take advantage of them. And so my father joined a cult unknowingly. And but the one thing about that cult is that it was really strict. So it kept him on the straight and narrow. They told him to go back to school. He went back to school. He ended up getting 5 degrees from one of the top universities in the country. He has all the way up to his doctorate while raising 2 children on his own, not drinking at all. However, as a dry drunk, people who don't know what that is an abusive alcoholic who's no longer drinking, but they're still abusive. So you still have all the behaviors and traits of an alcoholic, except you're not drinking, which actually is worse, because a drunk person falls asleep, they have horrible dexterity, all that stuff. But a sober person has got strength, they got everything. So when they're hitting you and being physically abusive, it's not, you have pretty much no escape, because it's that bad. So that's the kind of household I was raised in. But my dad worked really, really hard. He even got remarried, had another kid, but then alcohol, started drinking again. He relapsed. He left the cult finally, which may have been part of the stream of the downward spiral, because the cult was super strict. And without that really rigid system, he couldn't really balance everything. Right. And then alcohol took over. And I didn't know he had started back drinking. My stepmother at the time had basically kept it from us, because at this point I'm an adult. Right. And she never told us. I just remember her not wanting us to come over. I thought it was just she was being weird, like it was a weird stepmom type shit, you know, some funny acting shit. Turns out the whole time she didn't want us to know that he had started back drinking. Well, it got so bad, he ended up losing her. He became physically abusive with her, which he wasn't when he married her. He had never hit her, started drinking, and like really beat her up really badly. And she literally left that day. The day he hit her, she only left with her purse and her keys. She lost everything.
Oh, wow. She
went and picked up my baby brother from school, and I didn't see her again for almost 7-8 years. Wow. But that, yeah, it was that. It was that deep. So he had already lost his wife and his kid. My other brother and I I had another brother I grew up with, we were already grown and out the house. He's harassing us and calling us. He would call me like 20 times a day. He ends up landing in the hospital from drinking so much. The doctor tells him he's gonna die if he doesn't stop drinking. Literally, my other brother takes him home, and tries to get him sober. Now, mind you, getting sober from alcohol is one of the hardest things. It's right up there with heroin. Right. It's extremely hard to physically detox from alcohol when you've been drinking much as he had. So but my brother got him, we thought, on the straight and narrow. At least for the few weeks he was there, he was able to detox. Well, he got back home. We thought he was going to get back to work. Well, because at the time he was a university professor for a California university. And what ended up happening, I get a call from his dean of his department. I thought it was a research sociologist. Got a call from the dean of his department. And she's like, I got this number from his phone. He said I should call you. I was like, okay. I'm in his apartment. He hasn't been coming to work. So I knew all the signs, because thankfully she understood the signs of alcoholism. I came over to his house. She said the house is a mess. He broke all the furniture in the house. He was passing out even while she was there, like drinking. It's like alcohol bottles everywhere. He started smoking cigarettes. Mind you, my dad didn't even smoke cigarettes. And so she's like got me completely panicked, because I'm thinking, remember, a few weeks ago, I was just told my dad was gonna die. Right. And so I'm driving on the freeway when I get this call. At the time I was working in mental health, working with children who were in foster care and kinship care and in group homes, and kids who are on probation. It's something called wraparound services. So for the Department of Mental Health here in LA. And I was the facilitator, which meant I was the lead of this entire rap team. And I just left the case. It's a very hard job. You're on call 24 hours a day. I definitely do not recommend that system. It was not efficient for workers. Yeah. Whole other conversation. We could do a whole podcast episode on how we treat our social service workers, but
yeah, I got
it's a whole other conversation. But anyway, so I'm on the freeway going to my office, crying and panicking. I basically can't breathe. I have to pull over and get myself together, finally get to work, walk right into the program director's office. And this is the top person in our organization. Walk all the way. I just break down. I'm crying. And she's so wonderful because thankfully she's a psychologist and I worked in mental health. Mm-hmm. I told her we originally were able to talk to her what was going on. She let me leave work. And I just started this job, by the way. So I get that was probably like the worst moments of my life. I had to go get my brother, and mind you, everything's far in this story. So everything's like, we're talking between 60 and 100 miles apart. Oh, yeah, so I'm driving all throughout the county and other counties, having to go get my father, take him to the hospital. And that moment, I want to say, was around the time I started to really have like deteriorate as far as my depression and anxiety and mental health. And when that happened, I couldn't even go to work. I ended up leaving that job. I became a nanny, which was fine. It was great work and it was great money, but it wasn't helping my depression. And so I ended up leaving that job. I was only working part-time. I was becoming more depressed. And of course, you trauma bond with someone. A very unhealthy, narcissistic, abusive relationship. And then that video popped up again, the ACEs video. And I was already going to the doctor for some other health things, and the doctor had identified that I was depressed. I didn't even realize I was depressed. Worked in mental health, working with the children. I knew how to work with children. I did not understand how to work with myself.
Doctors functionally depressed.
I was very functionally depressed because I pretty much escaped by working for other people, working for the community, working for the children in my community, not realizing deep down I was trying to save myself. You know, my doctor, I'm going to my doctor for my sciatica because I have a back problem. Doctor's like, yeah, you know, I'm worried about your sciatica, but I'm more worried about this depression. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, he said, I believe you have, what's the word? Adrenal fatigue and some other things, physically and psychologically. So he sends me to a health psychologist. They swabbed my mouth. Come to find out my body was like at the point of barely producing cortisol. Because it was bad. Because my depression had gotten so bad I wouldn't get up sometimes and even take a shower. Like it was bad. And the doctor was like, "Yeah, we got to do something about this." And like I said, that video had popped up, and one of my regular visits with my doctor, we're talking about my health. At the time I was over 300 pounds. Forgot to add that part. Yeah, I had gotten to over 300 pounds. I was probably about 320. Yeah, I had gained over 100 pounds within like less than 2 years. The other thing I was there about was my health conditions as it related to my weight. But he sent me to the health psychologist. Now, health psychologist. And by the way, at this time I was unemployed. I think I was working part-time as a nanny. I was on food stamps. I couldn't even work. Like I was so depressed I couldn't work. I was lucky to have a roommate who was very understanding, and let me, I didn't pay rent for like a year. She was really cool. Yeah. Well, she was one of my best friends. She understood. She understood even when I didn't understand. Funny enough. So shout out to her. So, this is a doctor I'm getting through Medi-Cal, which is like Medicaid for California.
Yeah.
So they see to a health psychologist. A health psychologist is actually the doctor the doctor who determines whether or not you're mentally fit for bariatric surgery. But he told me, and I wasn't there to get surgery. My doctor just thought I could talk to him for support. But he told me, he said, normally my job is to, decide whether or not you get bariatric surgery. He said, that's not what we're here for. But if we were, I could not recommend you for bariatric surgery. He said, I don't think your problem is physical. I think your problem is psychological. It's your depression. It's how you see yourself. All these things were coming up. So when that video popped up again, I went back to my doctor, my regular doctor, and I said, "Hey, have you heard of this ACEs thing?" He hadn't heard of it. Never heard of it. Never heard of it. And mind you, at one point, he was the interim director of the entire clinic.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so after that, he and our sessions were basically us talking about ACEs, because I was like, because I said, "Hey, I did the test. My score is like 8." I think it was like a 7 or 8. I can't really remember because I'm not so focused on my number anymore. I used to be.
Yeah.
But it's like 7 or 8. And he goes, "I've never heard of this, but I think this is something to look at." So he and I started studying it together for the most part. In fact, he would call me. This is like no clinic doctor from the county is ever like that involved with their patients, right? But he would literally call me. He was already calling me like once a week just because of my mental health. Like I was depressed to the point where I was suicidal. And if I hadn't begged, they were going to put me in a facility. But not making money is one of my triggers. So I was like, that I can't work and that just basically exacerbate all the symptoms that I have. So don't do this. So I was able to get out of having to go to a facility, thankfully. But after we talked about ACEs and started working through that, it was like his light bulb came on too. And it was really dope. People would call me once a week or every 2 weeks just to talk about the things we're learning about ACEs. We both read The Body Keeps the Score.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're meaning to tell me on this here podcast, you went to seek help?
Oh, well, I didn't though. That was the thing. I went to seek help for something else. Right. And it just ended up
wow.
where
so you ended up educating your doctor.
I did. Yeah, that was my guy.
Your life and his life at the same time.
Yeah. And the wild thing is, he wouldn't have been my doctor except I had another doctor. Sadly, it was actually a Black woman doctor. She was mean. Like, she was so mean to me. So I put in a complaint. So that's my thing. I feel like in the hood, a lot of times we get really subpar services. And so I always make it a point, because I realized when I was a nanny, white people complain about shit all the time and they get results. And I was like they'll complain about fingerprints on an elevator. And next thing you know, every elevator in that building is sparkly, right? So I said, we don't complain enough. They say we complain a lot. Black people do not complain enough. So I report shit now, like, because they need to have a record of the mistreatment of patients, especially because we're low income, somehow we don't deserve respect. So I ended up getting this other doctor because I complained about her. And because I got connections, the letter went to some top people in the county, and they personally called me to apologize, and they got me the top doctor in their clinic. Yeah. So I'm just telling people, y'all got to report shit when we be in the community taking services from people and they be treating us like shit. You don't deserve that shit. Just because you poor, just because you Black, don't mean that you have to get mistreated. It's already hard enough when you poor. It's already hard enough. So the services that you've been paying taxes to, because poor people work, these services that we're also paying taxes to should be treating us with fucking respect. I just want to add that. And that goes for mental health services and physical health services.
Right. I'm with it.
So I didn't mean, I'm very much a talker. So I apologize if my answers are so long-winded.
So this is amazing to me, because again, of course, I didn't know the story. You found out Dr. Nadine Burke Harris loves us both. It changed our lives, but that same TED Talk is what I use for everything. It's my introduction. So if I'm introducing ACEs, I throw that in there, because the way that she talks, it actually seeks attention because she commands it. And I'm sure that your doctor saw that too, and it changed his life as well. So thank you for being the person that actually changed other people's lives by doing research on adverse childhood experiences. This is what I'm telling people to do. And I think my problem, and I'll be honest, is that we're not doing that at all. It's like, this is episode number 14. And again, I've proven that there's people with stories. Marv is number 9. My daughter's number 5. Because I'll be honest, Marv didn't know about it either. However, he introduced his friend who told a very candid story about his adverse childhood experiences. He related it. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to take this information and share it and give it to somebody else because we could possibly save someone's life. And you actually did that. And then you started advocating and doing this in LA. And for those who don't know, Marv is the producer of the show. So my issue is the fact that it sits on the CDC website. It's just sitting.
But you know what?
This discussion and.
But you know what? Let's be real though, and this is something. It's a little bit deeper than ACEs. This is about everything.
Okay.
You go to government websites, and there's all types of information that, as it pertains to our health, both physical and mental. And yet, so much bullshit is legal. So much shit is. I'll give you an example.
I'm ready.
If you look up how fortified vitamins in our food are actually part of why we have an obesity epidemic. Nobody tells you that. So for one thing, most poor people or low-income people, they eat processed foods. Most of those processed foods are fortified with vitamins, because what happens is processed food isn't real food, right? It takes food, transforms it into something else, but in that process, it takes out the nutrients. So drying things, mixing it with other chemicals, it takes out the nutrients. So what they do is they fortify the vitamins. They have these synthetic vitamins that they now put into your foods. So if you look at your cereal boxes, you'll see fortified with vitamin A or fortified with vitamin D. I mean, they added the nutrients later after they processed the food.
That is true.
Now, the thing is, all those fortified vitamins disrupt our body's ability to naturally burn fat. But it's in all of our processed foods, because big industries are poisoning us, disrupting our body's natural abilities to do things. So we walk around thinking this carbohydrates are bad, and it's not that carbs are bad. It's all these processed carbs are bad. It's all this high fructose corn syrup that's in literally everything. Corn is in everything, even in the vegetables that you buy. You buy a cucumber from the store, that shiny cucumber you see, coated in corn oil product. Right? So most people don't know this. My point in saying all this is that you can find that information that I just told you on the government's website.
So while I'm sitting up here advocating and saying CDC, and the information has always been out there. So
it's been there since the 90s.
It is. And I hate it. And I think this is the thing that bothers me the most is it's still there. We're just sitting, you know what I mean? It's just there. ACEs was actually discovered at a weight loss clinic.
Yes, at Kaiser's bariatric program. Yep. See, and that's you know what I love what you let me. This is why I love you so much. This is exactly why, because you're making that exact connection. So when I was talking to my doctor, we were addressing my obesity. We realized that my childhood trauma was directly correlated with that obesity.
Say that one more time.
My childhood trauma was directly correlated with my obesity, my adulthood obesity, right? But nobody ever made those connections. You know what they do? And the same thing with the information about what's causing obesity. We didn't get into baby formula, which is all fortified vitamins. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that we're being chastised as individuals, being told you just make bad choices. You niggas just don't know how to eat. That's why all y'all got diabetes. Nobody talks about intergenerational trauma. Nobody talks about the fact that now ACEs doesn't touch on the trauma that you've inherited in your DNA. That's epigenetics. You can Google it, right?
That's episode 11. I have someone that did episode.
Of course you did it, because you're on your shit. That's why. Of course, doctor. Listen, this is why you're such a badass. I love you. Because this is what pisses me off about all of that, is we are constantly berating people about their weight, about their choices, about their mental health, and then we'll fuck around and turn and talk about, act like we care about people. We just need love. We need to hold hands. No, we need to address these systems that are causing the problems that we're suffering from, not blaming individuals because we just want to find some way to absolve the real issue, which is white supremacy. We want to absolve them because we can't think that white people are bad. It ain't about individuals. It's about the fact that we have an entire system dedicated to killing us. You mean to tell me this shit about ACEs has been sitting on the CDC website, sitting on government websites, but yet our criminal justice systems have not changed?
Ooh.
Our laws have not changed to reflect that, hey, wait a minute. Some of these things that we're seeing in mental health that are resulting in certain types of behaviors that can be dangerous and violent are actually very much correlated with the trauma that these young people, mostly young Black men who are highly incarcerated more than any other group. And look, you work in education, you see how they treat these Black boys. There's all types of studies.
It's called the school to prison pipeline.
Listen, we can even go beyond the school to prison pipeline, right? You know that. You know all this stuff. I'm just talking to your audience. The fact is, this information is the government has, but yet our schools have not addressed this, right? Yet we're still criminalizing our Black children every day. Black girls are the next group, right? Our children's suicide rates have increased. But we had a Black president, by the way, y'all, and we got a Black vice president now, right? But yet, you know, we're saying these are examples of progress, yet our kids are killing themselves at a higher rate than ever before.
ACEs.
I read something that said Black boys' injuries by attempted suicides increased by over 200%. I think it's like 253% or some nuts number like that. And yet, go ahead. I'm sorry. I go in.
I actually connected with a few nurses and doctors in an ER that sent me some information about how many teens live in emergency rooms. Teens, emergency rooms, from cutting, from attempted suicide, all of the ACEs that are out there. And I have the statistics, I have the information, I have everything, but yet it's still not on the news. It's just sitting on a website. I mean, we talk about it, or we have a month and we celebrate it, but it's like, why are we celebrating something where we need to be bringing awareness to it?
Right. No. What do you mean? You don't like the just memes and stickers and balloons and shit? Like they, you know what I mean? Like I know exactly what you're talking about. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, but we ain't did shit to actually address mental health, except talk about addressing it. We talk about people should be aware. One of my biggest pet peeves.
This is what I'm trying to do in my many attempts, like how you have been doing for years. We've tried our best to get the information out there. We've looked, we have the research, we have the information, we have the discussions, but I'm ready to take some action.
Yes.
And I will share with you, I'm doing the best I can. You're doing the best you can. There are people out there that are. What I love is I actually have a following. So shout out to everybody that is listening to this right now. Thank you so much for supporting me, because that lets me know that it's working. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I've seen it. But I know it's going to take a process and some time, but all I'm saying is it was in 1998 and here it is 2022, and there's so many other things that have came up. COVID, they're trying to make that go away. They're bringing up monkeypox. What people don't know and understand is COVID still isn't gone anywhere, it's still there, and we're trying to make it go away for whatever reason. ACEs is not going to go anywhere. It's been there. It has a name finally. It's been going on forever. It just finally has a name. We've actually been talking about this for a while, about the importance of a conversation of ACEs and how can we promote it. How do you think we can promote it?
Oh, I think we've been doing a great job. Well, you've been doing a great job. I see your Instagram, I see your website, you know. I think doing things like this, these podcasts, and making it a part of a regular conversation is one of the first starts. I like to jump into conversations I already see happening online and then throw in ACEs like, hey, you guys should check out this video. Yeah. But also training trainers. So one of my favorite things to do is I also train people to become trainers.
Okay.
And I think with sharing that information, becoming, kind of creating a bunch of foot soldiers in this, because it's going to happen in California, and I believe Texas too, actually. But California has really been big on trying to get ACEs
They
into our regular curriculums at school, or systems in school, and our medical systems here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's because Dr. Nadine Burke Harris was the Surgeon General.
Absolutely.
But since her resignation,
But the thing is, sometimes you already get a ball rolling and people are moving with it.
oh,
So that's the beautiful thing, because once you train people in this, they don't let it go, especially if they're professionals.
right.
Like, they get excited about it. Because I also, like I told you before, well, I didn't tell you guys in this show, I told you, Dr. Tori, I've trained medical professionals.
Yeah.
It's funny, I went from learning about it
Mhm.
and then talking to my doctor and teaching him by accident, and
Right.
actually got hired by an organization to teach it to teachers, medical professionals,
Mhm.
people in education, parents.
Mhm.
And that's part of it, is incorporating ACEs into other work that you do. If you
Right.
work in schools, if you work with parents, if you work with your community, bring up ACEs as you learn about ACEs. You work in a community, work for a community center or a parks and rec center.
Mhm.
Have a day where you have someone come in. Like, people have to realize the roles that they're in. You can
Right.
incorporate new information. If you, like I said, if you're a parks and recs director, right?
Mhm.
Have a day. Say, hey, we're gonna do a training on ACEs. We're gonna hit up this organization. There's all types of nonprofits and clinics and all types of folk that have
Mhm.
trauma informed care trainers. And one of
Yes.
the main things they teach about is ACEs, right?
Right. I
Um,
started off my professional development at my school, brand new school, new position. First thing I talked about was ACEs. I had no other choice because I wanted them to know, especially with the kids that were coming in, that you really don't know. You know what I mean? Like, while it's a pencil, it might be the parents' pencil who they're missing, and you're taking this from them, and they might argue with you, and you're yelling, "What's wrong with you?" When it shouldn't be that. It should be, "Is everything okay? What's going on?" Taking your time out to listen. So I get it. That's the reason why I seek it from an educational standpoint and do the best that I can to educate people on it, because once you get educated on it, it's up to you to take advantage of doing what you need to do to get the information out there.
yeah, and these schools need it. Like, this is the reality. You talk about the school to prison pipeline,
Hmm.
and a lot of these schools are the problem.
Yep.
Like, they are re-traumatizing already traumatized children. I worked
Mhm.
in schools for years. So I used to run an after-school program in Watts,
Yes.
and for Big Brothers Big Sisters. And one of the ways to get into my program is you had to have a parent incarcerated,
Mm.
or be in kinship care, or be in foster care.
Aces.
This
Okay.
Exactly. This is before I learned anything about ACEs, by the
Yeah.
way.
Wow.
Um, this is like maybe well over, maybe like 15 years ago.
Oh,
I know
wow.
I look young, but I'm old. But I um was working in Watts, one of the poorest districts in our city, like one of the most neglected areas of the city. They are the school I worked at was literally across the street from Jordan Downs housing projects, Grape Street. If you ever heard of Grape Street Gang, that's where my school was, literally on Grape Street in 103rd. And during the time I was there, there was a gang war between Grape Street, which is the Jordan Downs projects gangs, and Bounty Hunters, which is from Nickerson Garden. People who don't know who Bounty Hunters are, Bounty Hunters, if you listen to hip hop, if you listen to TDE, which is where Kendrick Lamar started, and there was other artists, Schoolboy Q, many of them. Well, TDE was started by a guy named Top Dog, who was in Bounty Hunters.
Mm.
Um, and also J Rock, who's another rapper on that label. He's from Bounty Hunters. So just so people want to get an idea of what we're talking about. We're talking about like very dangerous area. Watts has like 4 or 5 housing projects, and it's not a big area. So it's 4 or 5 housing projects in one small little area, and they all beef with each other. So these young kids, now I worked in an elementary school, and the kids couldn't cross certain streets. If you lived, and even if you didn't live in the projects, there were certain rules. If you live in the orange gate, or the peach gates, they called it. That was the apartments that had the peach gates, and you had the apartments with the green gates. You had to maneuver a certain way just to, be in that community. And yet, the staff there was so poorly trained, you could hear them yelling at kids all day.
Mm.
Get in line. Be quiet. What are you doing? Stop that. I'm gonna talk about how rough this area was, because people think LA, they either think, they either do think Boys in the Hood or something, or they think we're all living in Hollywood. People have this weird view of LA that doesn't quite add up. But there are areas where, the rules are just very different. And the young kids know this, and they have to live like that. There's a great book that just came out called California Soul, about a guy who grew up in Grape Street. His family was in Grape Street, all that stuff. And now he owns a restaurant here in South LA. He's part owner of a restaurant. He just wrote this really good book. He talks about being in middle school and how the school had to let certain kids out who lived in certain areas out early, so that way they didn't have fights with the other kids. School was neutral ground, but once they got off that campus, they would start fighting and jumping each other. So kids who lived in certain areas had to get let out of school first, and then other kids could go home. Like, it was that much. So imagine.
It's interesting that you bring this up, because that's one of the things that, to me, I think needs to be added to the ACEs information, is community violence.
Yes, it's in the urban ACEs study. That one's there.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And we don't talk about it enough. This is the reason why I tell people so much that everybody has ACEs. I do feel like everybody has it. People are just not going to admit it because they just don't want to, for whatever reason. It sounds so bad. It really doesn't. It's adverse childhood experiences. It's not trauma, because that's all I hear is the word trauma. And I think people use that word and overuse it so much.
It's a buzzword.
Yeah, I hate it.
They misuse all the words. They misuse toxic. They misuse narcissism. They misuse gaslight. It's like, just because somebody doesn't agree with you does not make them a narcissist who's gaslighting you. Like, stop.
These are our people, and you know how they are. See, this is the thing. Like I said, this is the thing that people need to know. You're advocating for the West Coast. You've been there. You know what's going on. You've painted the picture. It's not easy, but the story that you just told is a real story. I mean, to hear yelling
all day. That was even my experience growing up as a kid and going to Black schools with Black staff. These aren't schools with mostly white staff. Most of my schools have majority Black staff, maybe mm-hmm. Black and Latino staff. Mm-hmm. And in LA, at least in the schools that I went to, some of the Latino staff, like they're brown and Black, you know mm-hmm. what I mean? So it's like, even people who look like you are screaming at you, and they believe mm-hmm. that this is how you're supposed to treat us, because that's all they've ever known. Right. They were treated like that. So when I started working in schools, it was amazing how, like, it shifts. Because when mm-hmm. I was a kid, it was just normal to get yelled at all day. Get in line, be quiet, blah, 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 right? It was normal. People yell at you all day. I was getting yelled at home. Coming to school, they was yelling at me. That was just how you're just, it's like, you don't even know it's trauma. You don't even know it's an ACE. You don't know any of these things. You're just living it.
Right.
And then when I worked in the schools, that's when my stomach started to turn. And when I was getting better training, that was one thing. Mm-hmm. But also, it was just, I realized we only do it to our kids, to Black kids. I was a preschool teacher in an area called Redondo Beach. Redondo Beach is a very wealthy, white, racist area, notoriously racist, right? But when I was a preschool teacher there, I ended up getting that job because when I was a nanny, I worked for actually a biracial family, and they really, really liked me. But it was the oldest kid's time to go to preschool, so they convinced the school to hire me just so I could be with their kid. And while I was working there, that was when I learned how to really work with children. Because you think that they let you yell at them little white kids all day? Mm-hmm. Get in line, be quiet, what are you doing? No, they're training their kids to be executives. So they train their kids how to negotiate. They train, I'm telling you, they mm-hmm. train their kids to learn how to understand and listen to each other so everyone's needs can be met at the table. Like, this is preschool. Mm-hmm. You get down to eye level. You teach them how to get along. You teach them how to figure out who's going to play with the toy next. And it's work. It took time. Don't get me wrong. It's preschool, so it takes some time. But once it became the environment and the practice, whenever new kids would come in, they fall right into that system.
And they have a school out there that is catered to adverse childhood experience. I cannot remember where. I will get this information. They do have stuff out there.
Yeah.
It just needs to be enforced a little bit more. Just my
There's
personal.
a few of them. Some are private or some are charters.
Yeah.
But even then, the hard part is at the system, because it's always the systematic thing. And then this is my experience training schools.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the system that they're all operating under is not trauma informed.
Right.
So they're expected to implement trauma informed practices in their school, but the system that they're having to work under is not trauma informed. So I'll give you an example. I'll get a teacher who will tell me something like, yeah, I really want to work with this kid a certain way. I want to, address their trauma and have a more trauma informed space. But the rules say if this kid behaves a certain way, I got to call security on him or call the school police. Really, it's school police. In my school, you were greeted by the police. That was my experience growing up. Right. You walk on campus, it's not an educator saying, hey, good morning. It's a cop, a few cops standing outside the gate for our protection.
Right.
But they harassing us.
Right.
Literally. They will pick you up. If the police saw you and you was like 5 minutes late, they will pick you up, drive you around, and drop you off to make sure you got a truancy. Just petty shit.
Wow.
So my point in even saying all of that was just that, while I was working at this preschool, I saw how they talk to their kids, how they train their kids, how they want them to think, versus our kids just learn how to follow orders. We learn how to follow orders. Those are the jobs we get too, right? Jobs where you follow orders all day. So it totally opened my eyes to how the way that we educate. So the way we can incorporate and really promote ACEs is by training these schools and getting them to understand what it is to be trauma informed, what it is to not just have an ACEs video shown, but how do I now implement new practices?
Exactly. You're right. You're right. I didn't force her to say this.
Am I saying stuff you've already been saying on this podcast for like ever? Is that what I'm doing?
I mean, this is
you did that last time. You were backing up everything I was saying on my show.
Yeah. So again, this is not news to me. I accept that I'm in right now. It's a brand new position. I am the admission review and dismissal administrator. So I'm in special education. And what's interesting is I have that leeway to have that discussion. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm trying my best. It's I'm connected. I know people. I know I can get into these schools. I know I can have this conversation, but I think they would rather pay tons of people to have unnecessary conversations about stuff that I honestly, what's wrong with being trauma informed is so important. You know what I mean? Like why are we not? Everybody's talking about mental health awareness, but they're just talking about it. I haven't seen anybody do anything. So
I just want you to be aware that there's a mental health awareness week.
And I need to do a little bit more. I've taken on this position with 16 Strong Project. It's a non-for-profit. I am their youth ambassador. I'm going to lead this initiative to at least, have a email distribution, something, a fundraiser, something, a race or something where they have mental health awareness. I would like to have like an ACE awareness something. It's gonna come. I don't know what, but I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to go into these schools and say, hey, I know that you all have mental health awareness, but what are you really doing? Show me what you're doing in regards to your mental health. I'm really interested. So I think that's the initiative that I'm actually going to lead when I go into the schools, because like the school that I'm at now, I kind of want to focus on what I'm doing at the school, which is special education, paperwork, meetings done. I don't want to do that because I know it's going to be a huge controversy. I would rather do it in someone else's schools to where I won't lose a job if I'm doing something that I'm very passionate about. So,
well, you got to be strategic, right? So I totally get that.
Yeah.
And also, just to say this, I think your message is to the people. I mean, definitely schools, because like I said a minute ago, systems and addressing those systems and informing those systems is important. Absolutely 100%. And along with that, I think because of how you talk, how you relate to people, your down to earth experience, your down to earth energy, I believe it needs to be taken to the people. And what I mean by the people, I mean non-professionals. Because one of the reasons why I got into media at all is because I felt like I was seeing a lot of conversations that many people in my community were not privy to and not invited to and not included in. And it really pissed me the fuck off.
Yeah.
Because when I train and I teach, I try to teach to where anybody can understand it. I was literally at the nail shop yesterday because when I got a COVID isolation for COVID, I had to go to work, and I said I'm not going to work without my nails done. So, so I was at the nail shop.
I see it.
Oh, I talk with my hands anyway, and that's why it's important to have your nails done when you talk with your hands.
Me too.
But I was outside the nail shop waiting for them to open so I could make sure they saw me first so I get to work on time. There was another lady there, and I just saw her. I saw her, this Afro-Latina lady, and I was like, wow, she looks really cute. Her whole outfit was cute. Her earrings had her little edges laid. It was really cute. So I was like, so she said something to me. She was, oh, are you waiting for the nail shop? I said, yeah. I said, and by the way, you look real cute, girl. And she was like, thank you. I'm trying. And then somehow we ended up, this happens to me a lot, y'all. Let me tell you, my first dates are hard because this is what always happens to me. Somehow I end up in conversations about people's trauma. So she starts telling me her story about like, yeah, I'm gonna get my nails done. I'm trying to dress better. I was so depressed and I couldn't even get out of bed. I would just go to work and go home, feed my kids and I go to sleep. And I couldn't even connect with my kids. She would just tell me all this stuff. And I started telling her about ACEs. And it blew her mind. She said, I never had the language. I never knew the words. I didn't know this existed. You're speaking to everything. I experienced all this trauma in my childhood, and now I'm seeing it in my children. I'm seeing it, how it impacts my relationships. Her husband is now currently incarcerated. So she's dealing with kids who have a incarcerated parent, on top of the fact that she's dealing with his family. And his family, he was raised by a narcissistic mother. And so she's dealing with that. So mom does little petty things. You know how narcissists, narcissists like to do this thing where they create beef between people to keep people in control. Well, that's what his mother would do. So she's dealing with all this trauma. Her kids dealing with all this trauma. So if she heard about ACEs, I told her to send her the link to the video. I said, watch the video. You gotta, I promise you this is gonna be able to change your life, be able to impact you. And she was just blown away. So I'm just a strong believer that, sharing with the people is important, sharing with like people directly. And I think there has to be a way to do that massively and make it easy to understand. Because I've been to some trauma-informed care trainings and ACEs trainings that it was way too clinical, way too clinical. Right. Get out of the clinics, get out of the clinician thinking and get into, community thinking. But I think you specifically are very skilled and relatable. And I think you're so down to earth. I believe in my heart that your message is to the people, not just the professionals, but I think your message is also very much for the people.
Thank you so much. We went through pretty much everything. So if someone is interested and wants to find out about Miss Vita Starr, where can they find you?
Well, here's the card in my hand. You can find me on Instagram, Vita Starr, VIDASTARR. You can also find me on my podcast with my friends called Champagne Sharks. You can just Google that. It's going to come up. It's a bunch of different types of stories and podcast interviews. Our lovely, wonderful Dr. VicTORIEus is one of our guests. Actually, is our last guest, our latest guest. That episode's not up yet, but it will be up probably sometime next week. But yeah, so you can find me on Champagne Sharks. Also find me on Instagram. And if you message me and tell me how you heard, how you found me, or how you found my page, and you say you found me here, I would love to hear from you. I would love to have conversations. I like talking to people. But Dr. VicTORIEus can tell you, because that's actually how we met on Instagram. I think we were just liking each other's stuff on Instagram, and then we messaged. I think you messaged me, yes. And we've been Man, this is wonderful, and it's
Yep.
been great conversations with you. So I talk to everybody. So just go ahead and message me. I love hearing from people. If you have questions, if you want things, to talk about, you want more
I think it would just be
resources.
great to have like a different perspective because we actually have so many similarities. To just have another conversation with someone about ACEs is just humbling to me. So I thank you again for being here. I thank you for the collaborations. You all will see us together. Vita is cooking up some stuff already. And so you all will see a lot more from both of us. So you all know where to find me on social media. I'm everywhere as Dr. Victorious or Be Victorious with Dr. Tori Williams. And this is it, you guys. This is not the end, but we're going to take a quick break. I got to focus on doing what I need to do because I have to impact. You all know what I do. And so you'll see, different excerpts and things from the podcast. But I'm wrapping up episode 14 right now. Thank you so much, and we'll see you later.